Can you give us just a quick a case study of an organization that you've maybe helped that go from kind of that old model to the new model and what they found?
Sure, absolutely. So this is a premium spirits company. And it's interesting, so it's relatively small, but they have wonderful challenges. One of the challenges, they're growing at 50% a year over the last 3 years. They're basically, or where we started from when I was engaged, was they live in an Excel world. And the problem with Excel is it caps you out in the analytics that you could possibly do. You can get through a reporter level and maybe even an observer level, but there's no way you can start getting into higher level scenarios, or certainly not simulations. So they asked me to come in and say, well, how could we possibly, improve our analytical firepower? Well, one of the things that was really nice was the fact that they actually didn't have a data warehouse, because oftentimes we need to keep the warehouse in place and make modifications to it. They didn't have it, so we didn't have to even work around that. And basically we were able to take all of their transactional data all over the world by whatever SKU you want to look at, by price, by quantity. It was a very interesting model because not only did they distill the spirits, they actually created the bottles. So it was an interesting challenge from a forecasting perspective. So it was relatively easy to create the spirit, but they had to know ahead of time how many bottles they were going to have to produce. And then they sell on a global basis. Well, again, by coming in, basically using some technology that exists, we were very quickly, within weeks, able to set up their data lake. And all of a sudden, they went from literally days of what it would take them. Now, this was coming out of Excel. What they were literally doing in Excel to maybe a minute and get the answer and be able to tie it back down, again, truly to the transactional level, to the penny. So from an auditing perspective, it was perfect because, as we all know, and again, not to bash on our friends at Excel, but Excel drives auditors crazy because of all the weaknesses that it has from a control perspective. By putting it into a data lake, you have almost a perfect audit trail because you can basically look back and see where all the data came from and how you're utilizing it. So, like I said, it's not scientific. I always kind of joke, if people are familiar with Edward Teller, he had a famous quote, is that the science of today is the technology of tomorrow. And what I try to tell people is that technology of tomorrow is today. The challenge is talking to the right people and finding out the tools, technologies, process improvements that are out there to really move the needle to get your company to where it needs. If you're not embracing data, if you're not embracing technology, you're going to be left behind. So you can't be thinking here in the 21st century that your goal is to survive. It really has to be to thrive, because just the magnitude and the velocity of change is just so great today that you have to be agile either from an operating side or from a financial side.
This sounds fantastic. You've got probably people excited on the other end here, but obviously change is sometimes difficult in any organization. What are some good tips that you can give folks out there in the FP&A world, CFOs, etc., to take their organization with them, not kicking and screaming, but in a concise and nice fashion?
Well, I think there are really two important elements. One is business partnership, and I mean that in the truest form, is understanding what our business partners want. I mean, most organizations don't exist for the purpose of providing finance. So it's understanding what the challenges they are, because the way that they are really going to adapt to this new analysis is if they get singles, if they get wins. And so when you start down the path of utilizing big data, I always tell people, look for that low-hanging fruit, hit singles. If you can just make someone's life a little bit better, they're going to continue to come back to you. Because again, instead of sitting there and looking at finance as potentially Dr. No, it is, no, I go to my finance people because they can make my life easier. And so that's really how you can start basically integrating big data into your day-to-day operation. So whether it's from a modeling perspective, a planning perspective, a forecasting perspective, it just becomes part of the norm of what you're doing. Of course, we're running it through our analytical tools. And again, it's a little bit of trying to move people. One of my favorite things is when you deal with an organization that say, well, you know what, we forecast from our gut. And I always like to go back to people and I say, well, then have the guts to forecast properly. And so one part is understanding your business partner. The other thing that I think is very important for finance people to do is actually touch and talk to the customers, because you truly have to understand what the organization is doing. And the more contact points that you can have, and it's if your retail is literally going to the store, spend some time walking around. But it can be almost anything. You can, if you're a medical device, I know a company that I've worked with, medical device. Not only do they send their FP&A people to the manufacturing, they actually send their folks to surgery, so that they understand that when we're talking about numbers, it isn't just what we would say, figures on a piece of paper or, numbers in a spreadsheet. It really impacts people's lives. And so whether you're a utility, I would argue, and I worked in the utility business for a while, I walked through a coal-fired power plant. So I have some idea when these people are asking about, they need money for CapEx. Okay, I understand, I've seen it. So I would really emphasize to FP&A professionals is to get out of your office, get out of your cube, talk to your business partners, get out to where the customer interacts with your product or service, and have a better and truer understanding, because you can take those insights, bring them into in-house, and again, help our partners make those better, faster, smarter decisions that they need to make.
Wonderful, Brian. I really appreciate you joining us today, giving us some fantastic things to think about. Where can people find you on the web?
Sure. The easiest place is just to find me on LinkedIn, and I had the advantage of having a name like Brian Kalish, which if you find Brian Kalish, it's me. There's only one or two that are out there. I publish a fair amount. I travel about the world. Like I said, I encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very friendly on making connections. So again, please reach out. Pleasure to be here today. Beautiful day in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Brian. And of course, you can find all Brian's details in the description below.